On the far edge of the galaxy, the planet Zephora floated like a jewel among the stars. Its cities hung in the air, connected by glowing bridges that shimmered like threads of light. The sky was never dark, painted instead in shades of violet, gold, and deep blue. Among all the beauty of Zephora, one person felt utterly alone. Princess Lysera sat in her high tower, looking down at the streets below. Unlike other aliens of her royal bloodline, Lysera could not walk. Her legs were weak and fragile, a gift and a curse from birth. To move around, she relied on a hovering chair that glided silently over the city floors. While others saw her disability as a weakness, Lysera often felt the weight of loneliness far heavier than her physical limits. The palace was grand and full of life, but for Lysera, it felt like a cage. She watched her peers playing, laughing, and learning to fly with the small anti-gravity wings that many young aliens used. She longed to join them, to feel the wind of Zephora brushing her face as they soared through the sky. But every attempt to reach out ended in whispered insults or pitying glances. Her teachers treated her carefully, always worried she might fall or hurt herself. Nobles and citizens kept their distance. Even her own attendants, polite and well-meaning, avoided long conversations, unsure of what to say to someone different. Lysera learned to speak less and watch more. She became a student of her world, observing its people and their routines from the safety of her tower. At night, she would gaze at the stars, wondering what lay beyond Zephora. Her fascination with the unknown was her only comfort. She had books full of distant worlds, tales of alien civilizations, and legends of travelers who had crossed the void. In these stories, she imagined herself as a brave explorer, someone who was not defined by her chair or her status. One evening, as the golden sun dipped behind floating mountains, a strange sight appeared. A silver ship, unlike any Lysera had seen before, descended slowly toward the landing platform. Its design was unfamiliar, sleek, and simple, with curves that seemed both strong and elegant. It was a human ship. Lysera's eyes widened. Humans were rare in this sector of the galaxy. Most aliens considered them primitive, but she remembered stories of human courage, curiosity, and invention. Somehow she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this time, the visitor would not see her disability first. Perhaps this time someone would see her mind, her thoughts, and her heart. The ship landed with a soft hum. Its doors opened, revealing a figure that seemed out of place on Zephora. The human was tall and strong, with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. His movements were careful but confident. He stepped out and looked around, taking in the alien architecture and floating bridges with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Lysera felt her heart quicken. She had never seen anyone move with such ease. Yet there was a gentleness in the way he observed the world. She wondered if he would understand her, if he would care about her in a way no one else had. For days, she watched him secretly from her tower. The human moved among the workers and traders, asking questions, sketching devices, and sometimes smiling at small children who ran past. There was no arrogance, no attempt to dominate. He seemed to respect Zephora, its people, and even its strange floating bridges. Lysera found herself drawn to his presence, feeling a connection she could not explain. Her curiosity grew stronger than her fear. On the fourth day, she decided to approach him. She moved her chair to the edge of the tower's balcony and hovered down slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and worry. What if he laughed at her? What if he turned away? The human noticed her before she could speak. He tilted his head and smiled, a warm, understanding smile that seemed to reach her very soul. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm Ethan, and you are?" Lysera's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I am Lysera, Princess of Zephora." Ethan's eyes widened, but not with surprise. Instead, there was a spark of respect, a sense that he saw her beyond the title, beyond the chair. "Lysera," he repeated gently. "It's good to meet you." For the first time in her life, Lysera felt her loneliness begin to fade. He didn't rush to pity her. He didn't ask her to move or prove herself. He simply acknowledged her presence, treating her as a person with thoughts and feelings, not a fragile object to be protected. Over the next few days, Lysera and Ethan began to communicate more. Words came slowly at first because Lysera was shy and cautious. But Ethan was patient. He listened, asked questions, and shared stories of human worlds, their strange cities, and the daring adventures of explorers who traveled the stars. Lysera began to laugh. For the first time in many years, she felt joy in her life, a lightness she had never known. She learned about humans' determination, their courage, and their strange customs that often seemed reckless to alien eyes but brave to her heart. In return, she told Ethan about Zephora, its floating cities, and her dreams of seeing the stars beyond her own world. She discovered that the human did not fear her disability. He admired her mind, her curiosity, and the gentle kindness she showed even when others ignored or scorned her. With Ethan, Lysera could be herself without pretense or fear. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, Lysera and Ethan sat near the edge of her tower. The glowing bridges reflected in their eyes. The world was silent except for the soft hum of hovering platforms and distant city life. Ethan turned to her, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Lysera, you don't have to be alone anymore." Lysera's heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. He smiled gently, leaning closer. "I mean, be mine. I want to be with you. Not because of your title, not because of anything else. Just because I see you, the real you." Lysera felt a rush of emotions, fear, hope, disbelief, and a warmth she had never known. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever seen her as someone valuable and strong. She wanted to speak, to say something, but words failed her. Instead, she looked at him, her eyes wide with wonder. Her heart swelled. Could this human be the friend she had always longed for? Could someone truly care for her, not pity her, not fear her, but simply accept her as she was? The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, reflecting the hope blooming in her chest. For the first time in her life, Lysera felt that perhaps loneliness was not permanent. Perhaps there was someone who could cross the vast distance between worlds and touch her heart. And so, on that quiet night in her high tower, the lonely, disabled princess of Zephora took the first step toward a life she had never imagined. She had met a human who saw her, truly saw her, and with his gentle words a spark had been lit, one that promised friendship, adventure, and the possibility of love. Little did Lysera know, this was only the beginning. The human who whispered, "Be mine," would soon change her life in ways she could not yet imagine. From that moment, her world, once small and lonely, began to expand beyond the floating cities, beyond the stars, and into the infinite possibilities of connection, courage, and hope. The morning after their first quiet conversation, Lysera felt a strange excitement she had never known. Her tower, once a place of silence and loneliness, seemed alive with possibility. She hovered near the balcony, her chair gliding softly over the polished floors. Below, the city moved as usual, unaware that a new connection had begun that might change everything. Ethan was already at the landing platform. He was examining small devices from his ship, adjusting tiny mechanisms with careful hands. He looked up as Lysera approached, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Good morning, Princess," he said with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" Lysera hesitated, her usual shyness pulling at her tongue. But she felt a warmth in his gaze, a kindness that encouraged her. "I slept well," she whispered. "And you?" Ethan laughed softly. "I slept like a human should. A little rough, but that's fine. There's much to see here, and I want to see it all." Lysera's curiosity flared. "All of Zephora? Even the floating forests?" she asked. Humans rarely explored her world. Most visitors only stayed near the landing cities, cautious of the strange currents and shifting bridges. Ethan nodded. "I want to see everything, but only if you guide me," Lysera blinked. No human had ever asked her for guidance before. They usually ignored her, wary of her disability or unsure of how to approach a princess. Her heart lifted and a small smile formed. I can show you some places," she said. And so their adventure began. The princess hovered down from her tower, Ethan walking beside her carefully, his boots barely touching the ground as if he respected the hum of her chair. They left the palace and moved into the city, where lighted bridges arched over the streets and alien citizens floated past on personal anti-gravity devices. People glanced at Lysera, as they always did. Some looked with pity, some with curiosity, and a few with open disdain. But Ethan did not react. He moved with confidence and respect, his gaze steady. He nodded politely at the citizens, acknowledging them without fear or judgment. Lysera felt a surge of pride. For the first time, she did not feel the need to hide. They stopped at a small market where vendors sold glowing fruits and strange mechanical devices. Ethan examined everything with fascination, asking questions about colors, tastes, and materials. Lysira explained patiently, enjoying his genuine curiosity. The human's ways were strange to her, yet refreshing. He asked questions she had never been asked before, questions that showed he truly wanted to understand her world. Then they came to a bridge that arched high over the city. Below, the lights of Xiphora shimmered like liquid stars. The bridge was narrow, with a slight sway in the anti-gravity field. Most visitors avoided it, fearing accidents. Lysira hesitated. She had crossed it many times, but without someone steady beside her, it felt dangerous. Ethan noticed her pause. "Do you want me to help?" he asked softly. Lysira shook her head. "No, I can do it, but stay close, please." Step by step, she glided across the bridge, her chair humming gently. Ethan walked beside her, matching her pace. Halfway across, a gust of wind from Xiphora's atmosphere pushed at them. Lysira's hands tightened on the chair controls. Ethan reached out instinctively. "I've got you," he said, steadying her with a firm, calm presence. Lysira felt her heart flutter. Humans were different. They were strong yet gentle, brave yet careful. She had never known anyone like him. On the other side of the bridge, they stopped in a small grove of floating flowers, their petals glowing in soft blues and purples. Ethan knelt down, examining the flowers closely. "Incredible," he whispered. "They almost look alive." "Like they're watching us," Lysira smiled. "They are alive. Xiphora is full of life you cannot imagine. Many humans never leave their own worlds. They miss wonders like this." Ethan looked at her. "Then I'm lucky to have you as a guide." Lysira's face flushed. No one had ever spoken to her with such warmth. For a moment, the loneliness that had clung to her like shadows seemed to lift. As days passed, Ethan and Lysira explored more of Xiphora together. They visited floating gardens, ancient libraries carved into mountains, and crystal caves that sang when the wind passed through them. Lysira shared stories of her childhood, her hopes, and her secret dreams. Ethan shared human stories of courage, invention, and the strange ways his people lived. Lysira learned that humans faced challenges she could not imagine. Crowded cities, dangerous wild worlds, and harsh climates. Yet humans persisted, adapted, and helped each other in ways that impressed her deeply. Ethan learned that Lysira, despite her physical limitations, possessed a mind full of brilliance and curiosity. She could calculate the strength of floating bridges, navigate the fastest routes through the city, and recount Xiphora's history with accuracy and passion. She was not weak. She was extraordinary. One afternoon, as they rested near a glowing waterfall, Lysira watched Ethan sketch a small map of the floating city. His hands moved with precision and care, his focus absolute. "Why do you draw?" she asked curiously. "Humans always like to remember what we see," he explained. "Pictures and maps help us share stories. One day I want to tell others about Xiphora, but I want it to be accurate." Lysira tilted her head. "Do humans never forget?" Ethan chuckled. "We forget sometimes, but we try to remember the important things. And I think meeting you is one of those things I will never forget." Lysira's heart skipped a beat. She looked down, uncertain. His words were kind, but the idea that someone could value her presence so completely was almost too much to believe. You think I am important?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady and warm. "Yes, you are important. Not because you are a princess, not because you are different, but because you are you. You are brave, smart, and kind, and I want to be with you, truly." Lysira felt a mix of joy and fear. This was a new feeling, unlike any she had known. Could she trust him? Could someone from another world really care for her as she was? Before she could answer, a small commotion began in the city below. Citizens whispered and pointed at the landing platform where Ethan's ship had arrived. Some noble aliens had begun to gather, curious about why a human was spending so much time with their princess. Lysira's stomach tightened. Ethan noticed her tension. "Do not worry," he said. "We will face them together. You are not alone anymore." Lysira realized then that he meant it, not just the words, but the presence, the courage, and the care behind them. Humans were strange, yes, but they had a strength of heart that Xiphora had rarely seen. And she, Lysira, was beginning to understand that this human could be a friend, a protector, and something more she could not yet name. That night, as Lysira returned to her tower, She looked at the stars once more. She had been lonely for so long that she had almost forgotten the warmth of connection. But now, with Ethan's presence in her life, something had changed. She felt hope. She felt possibility. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she was not alone. Lysera rested in her chair, her thoughts drifting to the human who had crossed the stars to meet her. She wondered what adventures lay ahead, what challenges they would face together, and how much of her world she could share with him. The loneliness that had been her constant companion was fading, replaced by a feeling she had never known: friendship, trust, and a spark of something deeper. And somewhere in the quiet hum of Zephora's floating city, Lysera knew that her life had begun to change. A human had come into her world not as a visitor, but as someone who saw her, truly saw her, and in that vision she had found a new kind of courage. Tomorrow, she thought, we will explore more. Tomorrow we will see the world differently, and perhaps, she whispered to herself, the lonely princess will no longer be lonely at all. The days on Zephora passed with a new rhythm for Princess Lysera. The lonely quiet of her tower was slowly replaced by laughter, curiosity, and conversation. With Ethan beside her, she discovered a sense of freedom she had never felt. No longer did she have to pretend, hide, or shrink herself to fit expectations. She could be simply Lysera, the princess who longed for friendship and adventure. Ethan's presence brought life into her world. He had a gentle way of listening, asking questions that were thoughtful and careful. He never rushed her, never pushed her beyond comfort, but he encouraged her in small ways. Sometimes he would place his hand near hers when she adjusted her hovering chair, not because she needed it, but because he wanted to show solidarity. Other times he would bring tiny gifts, books, mechanical sketches, or small human devices to examine. Each gesture, simple though it was, meant more to Lysera than she could explain. One morning, Ethan suggested a journey beyond the usual paths. There's a garden I read about in the archives, he said, his eyes bright. It's not far, but no human or alien visits often. It is said to be magical, full of colors and scents unlike anywhere else. Lysera hesitated. The route was uneven, and the garden floated precariously above the lower city. Many visitors had fallen or been caught in the shifting anti-gravity currents. But Ethan's confidence inspired her. Then we will go, she said. Together. They left the palace quietly, slipping through hidden corridors and small transport lifts. Lysera's chair hummed softly as they descended, and Ethan walked beside her carrying a small pack of supplies. The city was alive with activity, but most people hardly noticed them. The princess and the human moved with purpose, a quiet energy surrounding them that neither feared nor rushed. When they arrived at the garden, Lysera's breath caught. Flowers of every imaginable shape and hue floated in the air, some glowing softly, others emitting tiny melodic sounds when the breeze passed. Trees hovered, roots suspended as if gravity itself had no power here. Tiny streams of luminous water ran across suspended stones, creating a symphony of glimmering colors and soothing sounds. It's beautiful, Ethan whispered, kneeling beside a small patch of violet flowers. I've never seen anything like this. Humans try to make gardens, but none of them feel alive like this one does. Lysera smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. This garden was forgotten for centuries. Most think it dangerous, so they avoid it. But it is alive. Just like everything in Zephora, it responds to care and attention. Ethan reached out and touched a floating flower gently. It seemed to react, pulsing softly in response. It knows you are here, he said in awe. I think it likes you. Lysera laughed softly. Perhaps. Or perhaps it simply senses that you are kind. For hours they explored, discovering hidden nooks, talking about their worlds, sharing dreams. Lysera spoke of her childhood, her hopes of seeing other worlds, and her fear of never belonging. Ethan shared stories of humans, their courage in facing impossible odds, and their determination to explore even when fear tried to hold them back. Lysera realized that Ethan's patience and care were unlike anything she had known. He did not see her as weak. He saw her as a partner in discovery, someone capable of thought, courage, and kindness. The trust between them grew steadily, like roots stretching through rich soil. However, not all on Zephora welcomed their growing bond. Rumors began to spread through the palace and the city. Some nobles whispered that a human should never be close to a princess, especially one as delicate as Lysera. They feared change, feared the unknown, and feared that someone from another world could disrupt their carefully structured society. One afternoon, a group of nobles confronted Lysra as she returned from the market with Ethan. "Princess," one of them said, his tone sharp, "may we speak with you?" "Alone." Lysra's heart sank. She glanced at Ethan, who gave her a calm nod, understanding the tension. "We will see what they want," he said softly. In a quiet chamber, the nobles expressed their disapproval. "This human, he is not like us," one said. "He does not understand our customs, our ways. Your association with him is improper." Lysra's voice was steady. "And yet he is kind, brave, and trustworthy. He does not seek to control me or exploit me. He respects me and I trust him." Another noble frowned. "Trust does not change the laws or the ways of our society, Princess. You must be careful. If this alliance continues, it could bring dishonor." Lysra looked at them firmly. "I am not afraid of dishonor. I'm afraid of loneliness. I have lived my life in isolation, treated as fragile and incapable. But I am not fragile. I am not incapable. Ethan sees me for who I truly am, and that is more important than the judgment of those who refuse to understand." The chamber fell silent. The nobles exchanged uncertain glances, realizing that Lysra's words were not empty. Her conviction, the quiet strength behind her voice, left them unsure how to respond. As they left, Ethan took Lysra's hand gently. "You were brave," he said quietly. "I am proud of you." Lysra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she was defending herself not out of fear, but out of trust in someone who cared. Her loneliness was slowly being replaced by connection, courage, and the sense that she could face challenges with someone by her side. Their friendship deepened as the days passed. Ethan showed her human inventions and mechanical ideas, explaining concepts of engineering and design that Lysra had never encountered. She found herself inspired, asking questions and contributing her own knowledge of Zyphora's technology. Together they worked on small devices, sometimes repairing old floating platforms or modifying parts of her chair to glide more smoothly. In return, Lysra introduced Ethan to Zyphora's culture, teaching him the language of gestures, the meaning of ceremonial lights, and the subtle signals of respect and communication among her people. Ethan learned quickly, his enthusiasm matched by genuine care and respect. One evening, while they rested near a floating pool that reflected the twin moons, Ethan turned to Lysra. "You know," he said, "humans often say that friendship is one of the most important things we can have. And now I understand why you are the first person I have met here who makes me feel part of something larger." Lysra's heart leapt. "You would make me feel the same," she admitted softly. "I have been alone for so long, and yet, with you I feel seen. I feel strong." Ethan smiled, reaching for her hand. "Then we will face this together. Whatever comes, we will face it side by side." Lysra nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. She knew the path ahead might be difficult. There would be challenges, perhaps opposition from those who refused to accept change. But she also knew something she had never known before. She was not alone. She had someone who truly cared, someone whose courage, patience, and kindness could match her own. The next morning, they planned a small expedition to the floating cliffs beyond the city. The cliffs were dangerous and rarely visited, but they promised breathtaking views of Zyphora's outer regions. Lysra's chair hummed as they glided toward the cliffs, Ethan walking carefully beside her. The wind was strong and the currents unpredictable, yet together they navigated safely. Lysra guided Ethan, pointing out safe pathways, while Ethan shared techniques from human exploration, helping her adjust to sudden shifts in the currents. Their cooperation was seamless, a dance of trust and understanding. At the highest point, they paused. The city below looked small, a glittering pattern of lights and moving platforms. Beyond, the horizon stretched endlessly, a mix of purple skies and luminous clouds. Ethan turned to Lysra. "You see this?" he asked. "This is your world. It is beautiful, alive and full of possibilities, and I am glad I can see it with you." Lysra felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so long longing for connection, for someone to see her beyond her limitations, and now she had it, not as a passing thought or distant hope, but as a reality. She whispered softly, I am glad too. You make me feel that I can be more than I thought I could." Ethan took her hand gently, holding it in his. Then let us explore more, he said. Together. As the sun set over the floating cliffs, painting the skies in gold and violet, Lysera realized something important. Trust and friendship were not just words. They were actions, patience, courage, and care. And for the first time in her life, she felt that these things were possible for her, even on a world that had always seemed so distant and cold. For the lonely, disabled princess of Zephora, the presence of a human had begun to change everything. Her world was no longer silent. Her life was no longer small. And her heart, once closed and wary, was beginning to open, to hope, to trust, and perhaps to love. Life on Zephora had begun to feel brighter for Princess Lysera. The once lonely corridors of her palace now echoed with laughter, conversation, and the quiet hum of her hovering chair moving alongside Ethan. Yet even as she felt hope and trust growing, shadows of jealousy and fear began to stir among the alien nobles. They could not accept a human, someone from outside their society, having influence over their princess. One afternoon, as Lysera and Ethan were exploring the edge of a floating forest, they noticed a group of cloaked figures moving through the trees. Their movements were silent but purposeful, and the faint hum of anti-gravity devices gave away their intentions. Ethan instinctively stepped closer to Lysera. "Something isn't right," he whispered. Lysera's heart pounded. She had faced whispers and judgment, but never direct danger. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear rising inside her. Ethan scanned the surroundings. "We need to get back to the city safely. Follow me and stay close." The princess's chair hummed as she glided behind him, moving as quietly as possible. The cloaked figures were fast, their eyes fixed on the princess and the human. It became clear to Lysera that these were not ordinary citizens. They were a faction of nobles who had grown jealous and fearful of her friendship with Ethan. They moved quickly, cutting off paths and forcing Lysera and Ethan toward a narrow canyon suspended over the floating city. The drop was dangerous. One mistake could be fatal. Lysera gripped the controls of her chair tightly. Ethan moved beside her, scanning for weak points in the nobles' formation. Suddenly, a device shot from one of the figures, creating a field that tried to trap Lysera's chair. The princess's heart leapt. She had never seen technology like this. Ethan reacted immediately, activating a small counterfield he had brought from his ship. The device fizzled and collapsed harmlessly. "You are stronger than you think," Ethan said, glancing at her with a reassuring smile. "Just stay calm." Lysera nodded, her hands steadying the chair as they glided toward a safer ledge. The nobles were persistent, and it became clear they would not give up without a fight. But Ethan was clever. He had observed the terrain and spotted narrow passages and hidden air currents that could help them escape. "Follow me closely," he instructed. "Trust me." With precision, Ethan led Lysera through a series of tight passages and floating cliffs. The nobles tried to block their path, but Ethan anticipated each move. He used his knowledge of physics and quick thinking to disable traps and create diversions. Lysera began to understand the strength humans carried, not just in their bodies, but in their minds and ingenuity. Finally, they reached a ledge overlooking a hidden valley. Below, a small grove of ancient trees created a natural shield from view. Ethan guided Lysera down slowly, her chair gliding silently as if it had wings. The nobles above could not see them through the thick foliage and floating mist. Lysera's chest heaved as she realized they were safe, at least for the moment. I thought we would never escape," she admitted, her voice trembling. Ethan reached for her hand. "I would never let anything happen to you, not while I am here." Lysera felt warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she truly believed in someone's courage, in someone's care. Her loneliness, which had been a constant companion, was fading. She had someone who would face danger for her, someone she could trust completely. They rested in the grove, catching their breath. Ethan examined the area carefully, checking for any signs of pursuit. "These nobles will not stop easily," he said. "We need to plan. But right now, we are safe." Lysera looked around at the grove, its trees glowing softly in the dim light. Why do you risk so much for me?" she asked. Ethan smiled gently. "Because you are worth it. Not because you are a princess, not because of your title, but because you are you. You are brave, smart, and kind, and no one deserves to be alone when the world is so full of possibilities." Lysera felt tears prick her eyes. She had never been told such words before. She had been lonely, misunderstood, and underestimated her whole life. But here, in the presence of someone who saw her true worth, she felt her heart begin to open. As night fell, the grove glowed with soft, bioluminescent light. Lysra and Ethan shared a quiet meal, talking in whispers about their lives, their dreams, and the strange ways their worlds operated. They laughed together at misunderstandings, learning each other's humor and habits. Trust was no longer a fragile concept. It was being built with each shared moment. But even as they spoke and laughed, the danger was not gone. The nobles were already regrouping, plotting their next move. Rumors of a human befriending the princess had spread throughout the palace, causing fear and resentment among those who clung to tradition. They could not accept change, and they could not accept someone from another world gaining influence over Lysra. The next morning, as they prepared to return to the city, Ethan devised a plan. "We need to make our next moves carefully," he said. "If we act smart, we can show them that fear and jealousy will not control us. But we cannot underestimate them. They have resources and knowledge of the palace we do not." Lysra nodded. "Then we act with courage, together." Their journey back to the city was cautious. Ethan used his knowledge of human tactics and engineering to navigate hidden paths, while Lysra guided him through secret routes only a princess would know. They moved silently, avoiding observation, until they reached a safe spot near the edge of the floating city. Here, Ethan paused. "Lysra, you have a choice. You can remain hidden, avoid confrontation, and live quietly. Or, you can stand tall, show your people and the nobles that you are strong and that our friendship is not something to fear." Lysra considered his words. For so long she had hidden her true self, constrained by fear and isolation. But now, with Ethan beside her, she felt a strength she had never known. "We will not hide," she said firmly. "I will face them, and I will show them that courage and kindness matter more than fear and prejudice." Ethan smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "Then we face it together." The next day, Lysra returned to the palace with Ethan at her side. Whispers followed them through the halls, but she held her head high. The nobles tried to block her path, their faces set with disapproval, but Lysra's resolve was stronger than their fear. "I have returned," she announced calmly, "not to ask permission, not to seek approval, but to show that I will not live in fear. I have a friend who respects and values me, and I will not hide because of your jealousy." The chamber fell silent. The words were simple, yet their weight was undeniable. For the first time, the nobles could see Lysra's courage, not just in words, but in presence, in determination, in the quiet strength of her chair gliding forward with grace. Ethan stood beside her, his presence steady and unwavering. His gaze was calm, yet full of strength. "She is right," he said softly. "Fear does not build kingdoms. Courage does. Respect and kindness build bonds. And she has them in abundance." Some nobles began to murmur, unsure how to respond. Others clenched fists, anger simmering. But a few, who had long admired Lysra quietly, nodded in approval. Slowly, the chamber began to shift. The balance of power was not broken, but it was challenged. Lysra felt a surge of hope. She realized that courage was contagious. Her trust in Ethan, his bravery, and the bond they shared had given her strength. Together, they could face challenges that once seemed insurmountable. That night, Lysra returned to her tower, exhausted but exhilarated. She looked at the stars, their glow reflecting in her eyes. She thought of the day she had first met Ethan, and the lonely princess she had once been. The girl who had felt invisible, unworthy, and isolated had changed. She had found friendship, courage, and a companion who would face any danger with her. Ethan sat beside her, quietly observing the city below. "You did well today," he said. "I knew you could do it. You are stronger than you know." Lysra smiled, reaching out to touch his hand. "I did not do it alone. You were with me. And together, we can face anything." The stars above shimmered, reflecting the new bond that had formed. Lysra no longer feared isolation, and the once lonely princess knew that she had found a friend who would stand by her through danger, challenge, and adventure. For the first time in her life, Lysra felt not only safe but empowered. The human beside her had shown that courage was not just action. It was presence, trust, and the willingness to stand by someone, no matter the danger. And with that knowledge, she knew the next steps of her journey. Exploration, growth, and perhaps even love were possible. The world of Zephora had changed, and the lonely disabled princess was no longer alone. The palace of Zephora was quiet that morning, but not with fear or tension. Instead, it hummed with anticipation. Word of Princess Lysera's courage and her bond with Ethan had spread throughout the city and beyond the floating towers. Some aliens were skeptical, clinging to old traditions, but many had begun to see the human's presence in a new light. Lysera sat in her hovering chair, looking out over the city. The sunlight painted the bridges and buildings in soft gold, reflecting in her thoughtful eyes. Ethan stood beside her, adjusting a small device he had brought from his ship. Despite all the previous dangers, the human never lost his calm, patient presence. Lysera realized that his courage was more than just physical bravery. It was a quiet, steady strength that inspired everyone around him. "This is it," she said softly. "Today I will show them who we are, and who I am." Ethan turned to her with a gentle smile. "And I will be with you every step of the way." The journey to the main council chamber was filled with murmurs. Citizens, nobles, and attendants watched as the princess moved through the corridors, her chair gliding effortlessly. Beside her walked Ethan, his presence calm but firm. No one dared approach. The unusual sight of a human standing openly with the princess had unsettled some, but her confidence quieted even the most skeptical. When they entered the chamber, the nobles and council members looked up in surprise. Their previous attempts to intimidate Lysera had failed. Today she stood not as a fragile figure to be controlled, but as a princess who had found her voice, her courage, and her ally. Lysera raised her voice clear and firm. "I have been alone for too long. Many of you have judged me because of what I cannot do and perhaps because of what I am. But today I stand before you not afraid. I am not defined by my disability nor by your expectations. I am Lysera, and I will live my life with strength and choice." A hush fell over the room. The words were simple, but their meaning was powerful. The princess was no longer hiding. She had embraced her identity and her bond with Ethan, and nothing could shake her resolve. Ethan stepped forward, his presence calm yet commanding attention. "Princess Lysera is brave, smart, and strong. She has faced danger, judgment, and fear, and she has overcome all of it. I have come to know her, and I am here to stand beside her, not as a threat, not as a stranger, but as a friend and companion." The council members exchanged glances. Some looked angry, others doubtful, but many began to nod subtly. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Courage, kindness, and loyalty were qualities even aliens could respect. One of the older nobles, a woman who had been skeptical from the beginning, finally spoke. Perhaps we were wrong. This human has proven his worth, and Princess Lysera has shown her strength. Maybe change is not something to fear." Lysera's eyes sparkled. She realized that her courage, combined with Ethan's support, had begun to break down walls of prejudice. She was not only accepted for herself, but had also shown others that fear of the unknown was not stronger than understanding. The council nodded in agreement. They allowed Lysera to speak freely, and the audience listened intently as she shared her thoughts, dreams, and the importance of trust and friendship. Ethan stood beside her silently, supporting her without overshadowing her voice. Together they were a symbol of unity between worlds. After the council meeting, Lysera and Ethan stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched before them, glowing under the soft light of Zephora's twin moons. Citizens below waved and called out, no longer seeing the princess as fragile or different, but as a leader who had faced fear with courage. "You did it," Ethan said quietly. "You showed them the truth." Lysera smiled, feeling a warmth she had never known. "We did it together." For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with possibility. A world where she was not lonely, where humans and aliens could work together, where kindness and courage mattered more than fear and tradition. Over the next weeks, Lysera and Ethan became a familiar sight in the city. They visited schools, markets, and floating gardens, sharing stories and teaching lessons about courage, respect, and friendship. The citizens grew to admire Ethan not just for his human ingenuity, but for his patience, kindness, and respect for Lysera. Lysera's bond with him deepened every day. They shared laughter, ideas, and quiet moments in the palace gardens. She found herself trusting him completely, and she knew he trusted her in return. Their friendship had become a partnership built on mutual respect, courage, and understanding. One afternoon, Lysera guided Ethan to a hidden grove near the edge of the city, a place of glowing trees and soft floating lights. It had been their secret spot during previous explorations. She hovered her chair among the trees, sunlight reflecting in her eyes. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, smiling. "Of course. I was amazed by the colors, the lights. And by you." Lyzera's face flushed. "I was scared then. Scared of being judged, of being left alone again. But you never left my side. You never doubted me." Ethan reached for her hand gently. "Because I believe in you. I always will." Lysera felt her heart swell. She realized that for the first time in her life she had someone who truly saw her. Not her chair, not her disability, not even her title, but her. She was important, valued, and loved for who she was. "Ethan," she whispered, I feel safe with you. I feel happy. I never thought I could feel this way." Ethan smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then let us continue to be happy together. No matter what comes, we will face it side by side." The glow of Zyphora's floating city reflected in their eyes as they sat in silence, simply enjoying the presence of one another. Lyzera had known loneliness for so long, but now it was gone. In its place was trust, courage, friendship, and something that whispered of love. In the days that followed, the city of Zyphora slowly began to change. Humans and aliens alike learned that courage and kindness could bridge worlds. Lyzera's bond with Ethan became a symbol of possibility, a message that no matter differences in appearance, origin or tradition, connection and understanding could flourish. Lysera continued to explore her world with Ethan, discovering hidden valleys, floating gardens, and ancient libraries. They laughed, learned, and grew together, teaching each other about their cultures and worlds. Citizens watched in admiration as the princess and her human friend moved confidently, showing that strength came from heart and mind, not only from physical ability. One evening, as the twin moons rose high above the floating city, Lysera hovered on her balcony with Ethan beside her. The city shimmered below, lights reflecting on the flowing platforms and bridges. Citizens waved from below, smiling and cheering. Ethan turned to Lysera, his eyes calm and warm. "Do you remember when we first met? You were so lonely and I didn't know how much I would change your life." Lysera smiled, reaching for his hand. "And you didn't know how much you would change mine. I am no longer lonely. I am seen, valued, and cared for, and I will never forget that." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Then we continue. Together, exploring, learning, and growing. There is no limit to what we can see or do." Lysera looked at him, a smile spreading across her face. "Together," she repeated. The stars above Zyphora glimmered, reflecting the bond that had formed between the lonely, disabled princess and the human who had whispered, "Be mine." It was a bond of trust, courage, and friendship, one that would endure beyond fear, beyond prejudice, and beyond the boundaries of worlds. For Princess Lysera, the days of loneliness were over. She had found someone who saw her fully, a companion who respected and valued her, and a friend who had crossed the stars to be by her side. And in that presence, she knew that the future held endless possibilities. Adventures to come, discoveries to be made, and a life filled with connection, courage, and hope. The princess and the human sat together, watching Zyphora's glowing skyline, the floating city alive beneath them. No longer bound by fear or isolation, they were ready to face the universe as partners, friends, and perhaps more. And so, the lonely, disabled princess of Zyphora was never lonely again.